Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody joining in today. I am super pumped, as well as Prashant, my business partner of X-Enabler. We are talking everything scaling your startup and how to win in growing your startup. We're super excited and honored to have the founder and CEO of hipages, Robbie. Thank you so much for jumping on your first LinkedIn audio, I heard.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Not my
thanks
first
for being on the
podcast.
show. It's almost like a podcast,
Yeah.
but quite similar. We're really excited to get Robbie on. We'll be answering some questions at the end of the session as well. So if anybody would like to prepare any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we can bring you up on stage. Usually we do that 10 to 15 minutes once we pop off the LinkedIn Live. So this goes for about an hour. So usually I like to do that around 2:45, 2:40. We'll start doing Q&As. But until then, I'll get Prashant to just quickly jump on and play the introduction of the LinkedIn audio, and then we can jump straight into it.
Welcome to X-Enabler Audios, the podcast where we delve into all things tech, Web 2 and Web 3. Join your hosts Belinda Agnew and Prashant Garmi as they explore the latest developments in the tech world, discuss emerging trends and chat with industry experts. X-Enabler is a game changer the industry has been waiting for, offering flat-rate software development without the hefty fees. With our revolutionary subscription-based model, you can access all your development needs in one easy subscription. Visit our website, xenabler.digital. Now, your hosts Belinda and Prashant.
Awesome. So for the people that are jumping in, the LinkedIn audio, just to let you know, the topic today is scaling your startup and how to win with the founder and CEO of hipages, Robbie. We are super excited to have him on this LinkedIn audio. So I usually like to get the guests to introduce themselves because I think they can do it a much better job than I can. So Robbie, thank you so much for being on this LinkedIn Live. Do you want to just jump in and give like a quick introduction of, what you're up to, who you are, and hipages, like a quick bio?
Absolutely. Okay, let's do that see if I can do it in 10, 20 seconds. Okay, so I'm Robbie Sharon-Zipser. I'm the founder and CEO of hipages. hipages is a marketplace becoming platform subscription trade business that we focus in the trading space in Australia. The business has been pretty much my baby for the last 19 years. I'm not supposed to say that anymore. My wife said that. That's not cool. I've got a couple of kids. So the business is the largest in Australia. We have around 32,000 trade businesses. About 1.5 million households use hipages annually. We're on shows like The Block. If you're not familiar, it's Australia's most favourite reality TV renovation show. We're key sponsors of that show. We have a brand awareness of about 65%. We're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange with about 300 employees.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Robbie, for the introduction. So I usually like to get into understanding a little bit about the story because I think, stories are really important, especially for early stage startups. Obviously, you're not one now, but we always like to go back to how it all started because it can help a lot of people that are in the same position or were in the same position. So tell us about, the story of hipages. How did it all start for you? Like, tell us about where the idea came from. How long did it take you to build the product from the idea? And how long, soon enough, did you start seeing a success with hipages?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's an interesting story. I think maybe I'll give a little bit of a snippet about the personality traits. Obviously, this is a show for people that want to be founders or are founders or entrepreneurs. So I think, as a kid, I've always had businesses. I was always interested in business. Family had businesses. I love business. Really got my head into that. Did well at school, particularly on mathematics and business studies, and ended up doing like a commerce degree at uni. Got poached by one of those big accounting firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers. I worked there for a little while, worked at an investment bank for a little while, and then had a business before hipages. So I have a love for business, but the thing that sort of drove what came to be the creation of hipages was I got engaged. Actually, my wedding anniversary is today, so about 20 years ago, and we were looking to buy our first place. We managed to have a bit of savings. I was around 28 at the time, and we bought an apartment, very rundown apartment, and we were able to get it in. About 6 months later, we were able to scrap a few coins together to do a bit of a renovation. Really basic: your kitchen, your bathroom, your carpet, paint, some tiles, but nothing over the top, just to make it more habitable. And I started that process, and I found that the information that was publicly available using search at the time, or even what was more traditional classified directory, yellow pages style, if anyone remembers what that is, very uninformative. There wasn't a lot of information about how to go about it. Do I need to project manage? Do I get quotes? Do I need to check for licenses to do these renovations? Do I need to get body corporate permission? Do I need to get permission from the council? There just wasn't really a lot of information out there. And not only that, if I did get recommendations, which was primarily word of mouth or referrals, I didn't know if those people were any good. There wasn't a ratings or a review or recommendation process out there. I didn't have any idea about that, and I just felt that there had to be a better way. And a lot of stuff was still, at that time, print, in print formats. You have to get magazines and things like that. And I just felt that there was a relatively weak online proposition for content. So we created this online portal which had content around renovating and improving the home. And then we built a business model behind that, which at the time was a directory classified system. We had some really cool things that we did that made us set ourselves apart compared to other classified models. We were one of the first players to get indexed in Google with our content. We were one of the first players to use search engine marketing in Australia. Back in the days, if anyone remembers, it was 10 cents a click on Google. It was a really, really good way to get launched in the space. This was amazing technology that no one had really understood or was using, and we were early adopters of that, and we leveraged that to create what is hipages today, or hipages version 1.0, and it went gangbusters. I think the important question that you asked was how did you know you had something, and compared to not having something and just giving up and go back to your normal job as being an accountant. I feel that's the key question here, and I think, to be fair, you don't really know. I think if you're an entrepreneur or founder, you're always saying, "Oh, that's shit. That's not so good. I should try this. Experiment with that." But in my case, it was a real problem, and I asked around and found it was a real problem. And I did a bit of research, which is probably something we'll talk about, a little bit about data and research later on scaling. But I did some research, and I found that from a consumer customer point of view, the problem that I experienced was consistent. Just that difficulty, that friction of finding trades to do the job. And I also spoke to trades, and they were saying that they found getting customers and customers understanding what's involved in different types of trade services very difficult. I did a bit of a survey, and that was my first introduction to marketing surveys. And I had 3 really easy questions I asked customers. The first question I asked customers was a sample size of 40. Maybe it wasn't statistically significant, but I got comfortable with questions, and I asked customers, do you like this idea of creating this hub of content, and then you can showcase your business in that hub as like a directory? And the overwhelming answer was yes. But then the next question was, how much will it cost? And because we didn't have print and hard copy content, I said, well, it's not going to cost a lot. It'll probably cost a couple $100. How much money do you have in your wallet? And most people had $100 to $200 in their wallet at the time, cash. I know people won't know what that is anymore either, but they had a couple $100 in their wallet. And I said, yeah, it'll be about that for the whole year. And he said, oh wow! And the answer was, yes, I'll do that. What you just described for that service, and for me to showcase my business to be found in this directory, yeah, okay, cool. And then I asked them a third question, and I said, if I don't get you much in that first year, because we're just getting started and we're just finding our feet, would you pay the same amount the following year and do the same thing again and give it another go? And the answer was yes. And that interview was super cool because, those questions that I asked, I was able to get enough data to write a business case out of it, like a business strategy and a business case out of that, understanding the size of the market and doing some more research to append that key customer finding was super important. And then I think the business was born from that. That's how we came about
Amazing.
hipages.
So I just want to recap that you touched some really interesting points, like the customer research and like doing the actual business case, which is very very important in early stage startup. I just want to ask the following story, like from that early stage startup and sort of like an idea and an experiment to what Hypage is today. How did it change? Like what did you have to evolve to get to where you are? Because there are a lot of startup, they go out there, do stuff and experiment and be even successful at an early stage, but they fail to scale up. They fail to actually keep going and becoming big. What was your key things that made you like keep going and become much bigger success?
I think there's like a little pre-story, and then there's probably three hard points that I can answer that question with. I think the pre-story is I have met a lot of, now that I've sort of where I'm at, I meet a lot of founders and new people. I do a bit of mentoring myself. I think the thing that, and this is part of to our story as well, I think the thing that I've learned is that don't be afraid to start selling, and you need to be able to sell very, very quickly. So you need to, it's all well and good if you're an engineer or a product guy and you build a product, but if no one's buying it, you actually have nothing. So you need to be able to get your product to market very quickly. And even if it's rough and it's not beautiful and it's not the most beautifully designed, getting customers to buy what your idea is or what you have to get some, what I would call early traction is really important. So the thing that I failed to say in the previous backstory is we were able to get the technology, and the site looked terrible. Like if you go back into, I think it's Wayback Machine, and look at what we looked like 18 or 19 years ago, you'd fall off your chair and say, oh my God, I can't believe they launched that site with that looking the way it did. And the thing is, we weren't so proud like that it had to be so beautiful that every button was polished and every widget was looking perfect. We just went to market with something. So we went to market very quickly within 3 months, we had a product ready to go. That's how long it took us to build this idea. We had some nice little technology within it that was a little bit different to some of the other players at the time. And one of the things that I had to overcome was to speak to customers. So that survey I talked about was really cool. But the other thing is I didn't know how to talk to trades. I'm not a tradie myself. I'm an accountant by trade. I'm a university white-collar kind of guy. How am I going to talk to blue-collar people? And the way we did it was I gave 100 customers a free trial of the service on this rudimentary product that we had for 1 year. And then we did another 100 for free for 6 months, another 100 for free for 3 months, another 100 for free for 2 months, and then another 100 for free for 1 month. And by then, I'd probably spoken to 2,000 trade businesses in Australia. It took me a couple of months to do that. But I'd gotten comfortable to sell. I was able to actually talk to customers. I understood what they wanted to hear, what they wanted to get from the product that we were creating for them. And we were able to quickly, easily generate what they wanted as well, which was inquiries from consumers. So we were able to talk, and we overcome it. And the business model formed from that. So we started the business with a 30-day trial process. And then so we had this perpetual flow of potential customers that we could sell to. So I know that was a long story, but I felt like I failed to tell that whole backstory of how we got the engine running. And we were very particularly calculated in how we put those customers, what trades, what categories, and what locations we put on, so that we had full coverage across Australia. And so that actually worked. It really, really worked. And that's my main opening theme, is have something that you can sell very quickly to prove whether you can make it work or not. And that doesn't really just apply to if you're a startup or you're an entrepreneur or getting going. It even applies into bigger businesses where you might have a business unit that you work in a bigger business. Get your product to market very, very quickly. And there's a book to read, actually. It's called Sprint. And I think that's really applicable for more larger organisations, but it also applies to smaller businesses. And just talks about the concept of getting to market something quickly with no knowledge or something simple to see if you can get customers. Now, the 3 big points, and I won't go into the level of detail I just did there, so don't worry. I'll just talk about the 3 big points. I think funding is really important. You need, essentially once you've finished your raise, there's a whole probably conversation on funding. You can go and do a whole hour podcast.
Yeah, that was my next question. We'll talk about that next.
But funding is super critical, and I think you have to make some decisions as a business as to what you want. Do you want to dilute your ownership and grow faster and have maybe a thinner slither of pie, but a much bigger pie, or you just want to have complete ownership? And there's pros and cons on all of that stuff. So funding was a big part in terms of scaling up. Technology is just continuously evolving, and you need to sort of accept that, half the stuff you're going to do is going to fail, or you're going to get learnings from. I use the word fail too much, I've been told, so you've got to use the word learnings. It's positive language. And then the other half is going to just, might kick. Not even half, maybe a third will kick, and be really, kick it out of the park, that is, and it's just going to work. God knows we tried in the 19 years we've been in business, hundreds and hundreds of things that just did not materialize or was, 10x scalable. But over the time that we've been doing it, we found a few things that were 10x plus, 100x plus scalable. And then I think the third the big play is getting, if you're most businesses have to hire people. Doesn't matter if you're a coffee shop or a large technology company, people is going to be critical, and having the right hiring and people culture is just going to be the key thing to help you scale. You can't do everything. I often say I'm like chief water boy. I'm not really good at anything. I'm not amazing at any one thing. I'm just kind of good at everything. But when you start to get to larger scale, you start to need to get specialists and experts in specific areas, whether it's marketing, product, accounting, technology, service, HR, legal, all that stuff. You're going to need to start to get specialists in. So being able to create an organisation with an amazing culture and good hiring practices is going to be key to scaling up.
Yeah, and I think on the point with the funding, I think those are really good points that you made about the scale and making those decisions. I think funding on its own is like a whole another topic, but I'd really like to get your understanding on the raises that you've done to date. What does that look like? And especially in a market like today, startups are just really struggling to close a raise. It's taking months, if not years, even startups that have revenue and a product market fit. So it's one of those things where I'd like to understand, what are the, 3 tips that you could give startups in a market like this to stand out to raise money? Yeah.
So I'll do this one as best justice I could possibly do. It is a huge topic, but it's fair to say that in this business, in hipages history, I've probably seen every type of capital raise and scenario of capital raising or funding and different economic environments that you could possibly see. And the 2 different options of funding, you can break it down into 3 or 4 things. One, an early stage business, anything you can do with personal funds, credit cards, using your offset loan if you have the offset loan to pump into a business, support from family and friends. I mean, that's an early stage bucket, and you can go into a bit of detail on that. Funny story, just in our business, I remember, you probably can't do this anymore, but I had a pretty good credit rating because I had a pretty decent job before. And I remember applying for 5 credit cards with the maximum application at the same time. I think I had like $200,000 of credit cards with 5 different banks when I first started. And back then they didn't have a centralized credit bureau, and I was able to get a couple $100,000 in credit cards, which we were using to pay staff and all that stuff. So that was the first year or 2, fun and games, moving money around between credit cards. But I guess really maybe the theme from that is you're going to have to get scrappy, especially in a tough market. and find ways to get cash in the business. That was something I used back then. Maybe you can't do those things anymore, but I do know that there's just different scrappy ways of doing things. In terms of scaling up, you're moving to sort of early stage seed rounds, and then that's sort of looking at there's different players in the market that do offer early stage seed capital, and that sort of targets like high net wealth or some early stage seed funds, and there are a few of them in Australia. So it's not the venture crowd so much, but it's just seed early stage venture funds. And you can get a couple $100,000, to $1 million of early stage capital through those vehicles. I think the thing that it's worth calling out from all the different types of funding options that I'm about to just rattle through quite quickly, you absolutely have to have an immaculate pitch deck. 10 pages, no more than 10 pages, and there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, worked examples of what a pitch deck should look like. Things like you need to make sure you have the TAM, the product and the concept really clearly articulated, the financial metrics and potential covered on that, maybe even have an idea of commercialization. There's like this fundamental half a dozen to 10 slides that you have to have in that pitch deck. It doesn't matter where you are in your stage in the raise, and practice that pitch till you know it like the back of your hand, and it's super confident to present with energy, passion, and enthusiasm. So that's a key thing to take out from funding. And then in terms of the different types of other capital raises, obviously there's the standard equity raises. There's partnership equity. There's preferred equity. There's all different variations of types of equity. I think what you're talking about though in this environment, if you do take equity, I think founder, early stage venture guys and girls, they need to sort of accept that the valuations are not what they used to be. And you might have to take a bigger dilution to raise capital. We certainly did. It's not uncommon in that early stage to give up 30 to 50% of your business. And some people think, oh my God, that's a huge amount. But, if you really want to get the idea off the ground and this is the circumstances you're in, you kind of have to make that compromise to get that capital in, and that's the equity. Or there are other options, and they come with catches. And that's usually some sort of debt structure, where you might introduce a different type, like convertible notes, debt, warrants. There's venture debt. There's a bunch of stuff in that, and then each one of them is a whole story in its own right. But I think the key theme is you need to have a good story. You need to actually be able to substantiate it with good data, and you need to be super confident and passionate about whatever idea you're presenting. And you will find someone that can support your idea and fund it. I think that's all I can say at this stage without going on another 1 hour podcast. LinkedIn audio cast.
You've given so much in-depth information. I love that you actually do that. Not many people do, so thanks for sharing those. For Jay, I know you're raising your hand and you'd like to ask a question. With the questions, we're going to move into the Q&As in about 10 minutes or so. Around 10 minutes. So if anybody would like to ask a question, please raise your hand now, so we can get you up on stage in the next 10 minutes or so. Pete, did you want to jump in and...
Yeah, sure. I want to touch a little bit on the technology side of the complexity or the ever-changing technology and how to keep up with that. What do you think, how it changed with the technology and how important getting the technology right, not initially as you said, just putting together and getting out there, but eventually when you started scaling up, how it changed and became more and more pivotal piece of that, and how did you do that?
Yeah, look, it's another big question. Look, at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision. You want to get to market with a product and it's not beautiful and perfect, and see if you've got an idea that's got legs. The risk that you have with that is you do get scale, and you need to support that scale. So what happened in our business is an interesting one. We got scale pretty quickly. People liked the price, they liked the product. We were growing at some crazy exponential rate when we started, and we're obviously growing still to this day, but the rates were astounding, and we knew we had a real business there. But the reality is that the amount of money we could invest in the technology was extremely limited. We went into a time when technology funding was pathetic. we were just pretty much a quarry as a country. Everyone was putting money into mining. And so we went through that hardship of people not really putting anything into this space. So we had to make do with what we had. And in that situation, we got to scale, but we accumulated, and if the audience is obviously in technology, they'd be familiar with the term called technology debt. And so with technology debt, what happens is you sort of, you build a stack of code that works for a certain number of customers and clients and your internal systems, it's sufficient, and you keep building and building on it, and you create this thing. Most companies, and it was funny, I was watching the Uber story, I forgot the name of the movie, and they talked about the monolith. And if you don't know what a monolith is, it's like effectively it's all the code stacked on top of each other as you keep putting on more features. And so that technology eventually results in what they call debt, and you carry that debt like a backpack with bricks on it. Every year, every month that goes by, you put more and more, and it gets heavier and heavier, and you start to slow down, and you end up slowing down as a company. So I think at the end of the day, you've got to find the right balance of having perfect technology, thinking about scalability and achieving operational leverage and growth. And I fundamentally don't believe having perfect technology is the right course. I think if you score yourself at a 6 or 7, that's a good number to be at in terms of how good your technology is underneath the hood. Because first of all, if you're aiming for perfection, there's nothing to say that that's going to be out of date within 3 to 6 months. So you've over-invested, but you still need to run the business and not carry too much technology, and you need to be agile enough. So our story is an interesting one. It took me a while to get my head around it, and it's a good question to ask because it's something that you'll need to think about as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as you grow and move in your business. So we've settled with about a 6 or 7. That might scare people, but it's actually a good place to be because you're not crazily overly investing, but you're doing the right amount to do the right level of testing so you can keep moving forward. I think we underinvested in the first decade of the business, but in the last 3 to 4 years, we've exponentially increased that investment to ensure that we can start to move at speed. And our business is evolving nicely from becoming a marketplace to a platform and a true SaaS sort of business over the next couple of years. That's a key part of our strategy. So I think at the end of the day, you as a founder need to weigh up the options, whether you want to scale or you're striving for perfection. But I think most people from experience, I'm only speaking from experience, I don't know everyone's businesses, I don't know all the audiences, categories that they operate in, but I think a view of 6 or 7 is not such a bad place to be.
That's amazing. And in terms of when you actually scaled it, did you have a technical co-founder at the starting?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. I think that's important to call out. So I'm the CEO of the business now, but I have a co-founder, and my co-founder was an engineer. I took up the operational arm of the business, so all the operational aspects from finance, accounting, legal, HR, sales, service was in my remit, and the technical co-founder took up product engineering, design. For me, I've been sole CEO it's getting up to 4.5 years now. I've had to pick up the whole technology side, the product and engineering side, and it's been an amazing learning experience. The things that I described in the previous question is stuff that I've had to pick up and learn and understand in the last few years.
That's great. You were trying to ask something.
Going back to what you were saying about the product and the market, the technical co-founder or technical guy, you definitely need somebody like that for sure. P, did you want to continue to ask questions? I'm thinking we should get people up on stage and do Q&As. Sure. Robbie's free to do that. Just because I'm getting a couple messages on LinkedIn and I think people are keen to ask questions.
Yeah, sure.
And I think, it's a good opportunity. If we've got half an hour, I'd like people to go on stage and ask Q&As.
Yeah. I'll ask just one question before I let everyone jump in. So Robbie, the final question I want to ask is, as you mentioned, you had a co-founder, and of course, as you grow along, you had to bring the specialist in and grow the team to the size it is today. Who are some of the key people that were with you in that journey, and how did you find them? Because one of the key struggle that entrepreneurs today have is how to find co-founder, where to go and find the right staff, and how to actually scale the people side of the business.
So there's always a story with these things. So in our case, most businesses will experience this. This is just speaking to other CEOs and other founders over the many years of being in business. Most people will experience this. So this is a story that will happen. So you'll get to in the beginning, it's just you or a co-founder and maybe another loyal friend that's working with you. It's two or three people, working hard. In our case, not to be cliched, but in the back of a garage, actually a car alarm shop. My co-founder's father owned a car alarm shop. And we were working our guts out 70, 80 hours a week. And then you bring in people and then you get to 10 people, you struggle a bit. You get to around 16 people and it also, you bring a person in and then you lose a person. You bring a person in, you lose a person, and you don't get the best people. So one of the things that we did at the time was we brought in an HR person and now known as People and Culture. And I think, that helped us get from the 16 to, 16, 20 people that we were at. We got to 60 to 70 people. But then we got to some sort of serious scale and we also had some good funding. And so we were able to pay and attract because I think the catalyst is getting a good people and culture person in as soon as you possibly can. That's what makes the difference, because then you can actually develop the benefits, you can develop the environment, develop the culture, make something unique and special in your purpose and vision and values and leadership charters as a business. And that starts to drive more and more better quality people. Now, at different stages of our life cycle as a business, we brought in different expertise, but that, people and culture person was a key hire. And then you move into, in my case, I was very operationally hands-on. So, we got a good financial controller and then ultimately a CFO. And then we moved into marketing, got a specialist in marketing, a specialist in service, a specialist in product, a specialist in technology. And as every stage of our journey, we've brought in new layers. And some of those people, then you cycle through them. They're good for the layer. They're a good layer for the level of the business where it's at in that point in time. But then you then move better and better, or more. Not that they weren't good people. No one was bad. It's just at different stages of the life cycle of the business, you can bring higher and higher quality of people. We have an amazing executive suite today, but that didn't come from nothing. It was a massive investment in the people and culture of the business to drive that. There's a whole other audio cast that you can do on how do you develop culture in an organization. And I'm very proud to say that hipages is a business that's with the second best place to work in Australia 2 years in a row. And I think that's super powerful. So I think in summary, and I talk a lot, but in summary, creating an organization with a meaningful purpose, a meaningful vision, exceptional values, and a strong leadership charter with an amazing culture is one of the ways you'll drive people to want to work for you.
Yeah, totally can agree on those points. I think it's really difficult in general to find really good talent. I think we all struggle with that, but it really comes down to building a really strong leadership team and obviously telling a story and building a really good brand to attract the right talent. But yeah, no, really good answers. So I'm going to just jump in and start the Q&As. If you don't mind, Robbie, just because there's so many DMs I'm getting and people just really want to ask questions, and I just thought it'd be really good if we can start a little bit earlier. So we've got Shashi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Apologies if I'm not. Do you want to just jump in and ask your question to Robbie?
Yeah, Robbie, it was really fantastic. I'm actually right now in the founding team of two startups, co-founding one tech company and one Web3 tools. So my question to you is how to how to look at the valuation of the company and how to secure the leads. So these areas. So I want to understand more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, the valuation questions are, a difficult one to answer. But I'll give it my best. And I think so. It's a two-part question. If I just play it back, so the first question is how do you get a gauge on valuation, and two, how do you go about getting people interested to participate in the rounds that you're looking to raise the business at those valuations. Do you think that's a fair summary of the question, Belinda, the way you heard it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the second. Let me digest the answer to the first one. I have an answer brewing, but I think I can answer the second one quite quickly. In our case, I've always found someone that's good at that process. You're busy running the business, setting it up, so I've always found along the way that there are good advisors out there that help you raise capital, and they will have the network and they know all the players that are investing, and there are a few players around the traps, and I'm happy to introduce or connect with a couple of those if you would like, especially in Australia. I've got some pretty good connections there, so happy to make intros if needed. So getting a good advisor to help with that process is good. Now, that advisor will also help with determining valuation. Now, having said that, I've come across just privately through my own investment some really shit advisors that have given really poor advice to founders with unrealistic expectations on the valuations of their business. Now, on valuation, there's lots of different ways to think about it. The traditional way of evaluation is a DCF model, but it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do for businesses that have maybe no customers, no brand, and it's more of an idea. And I remember reading a book. It's called The Dark Art of Valuation, and it was a bit of an eye-opener. And so it all depends on when you think about valuation, there's a number of variables that you need to take into account, one of which is the addressable market, the level of competitiveness in the market, doing those standard SWOT analysis of the competitive nature of the market, the uniqueness in the technology that you've created, and some proof points around the commercial viability of the product. So your valuation will likely improve if you've got pre-commitments to a product or some signed contracts with connections on the product. Now, that may be harder to do than said, but that definitely will help. So the valuation question is a really open-ended question. It's a hard one to answer. It's like, how long is a piece of string? But those inputs and the use of an advisor will certainly help with getting to a position on valuation.
Yeah, that's really thank you for that. I just want to understand, apart from LinkedIn, there are any good tools to generate leads and convert them. So I just want to if you have anything in mind, that would be great.
So you mean like leads as in like investor leads? Is that what you're referring to?
It can be investor leads and it can be some kind of project leads. Basically, we do a lot of projects in tech. So
customer
customer.
list, potential customer
Yes.
list, yeah. Look,
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a fan of be transparent. I'm a bit of a fan of extracting data that's publicly available, scraping, and offering a free trial, a free service to those customers, or giving them access to something for free, or a white paper of your concept is certainly valuable. Preparing a call list and actually picking up the phone and calling and talking to people about that. Networking events are also really powerful, finding the right ones to go to. I think one of the things I've learned is to be comfortable with your own voice and present and talk about it. Expos and getting a stand at an expo, shows and things like that, with that note showcase on the industry, getting a stand there and just having the opportunity to speak to potential customers, or what you call leads, that are relevant for your category, of course, are super helpful.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shashi. Thanks so much for that, for jumping up on stage. Gil, did you want to go next and ask your question to Robbie?
I did. Hey, Robbie. How you going, mate?
Good.
Good. Thanks for all the insightful points that you shared with us. My question it was a kind of a bit of a segue from what you were discussing before about obviously creating good culture, meaningful workplace, and so on. And I think the hot topic, definitely in our company, and I'm sure probably a lot of other companies as well, is the idea of flexibility. People I guess have different understanding and I don't want to open up a can of worms here if there are hipages employees in this chat at the moment.
I'd like to say we have some thought leadership on that, so I'm happy to share my views on that for sure.
Yeah, obviously in a post-COVID world, the expectations have changed significantly, and I suppose, the more specific question, I'd love to obviously open up to just, what you feel are some of the key things you guys are doing well, or would like to do more of in that area. Specifically, is it do you tailor plans on an individual basis? Is it, keeping in mind the wider team? Because it's always a balance of, what works for the individual so they can thrive, and obviously a high-performing team is a collection of individuals performing, but then you've also got to think dynamically what's not disruptive and has a domino effect, across the team. So it's a little bit of a battle. We're definitely trying to find that middle ground, but keen to get your thoughts.
Look, it's another a big topic, and I know that I can go into quite a lot of details, so I'll try and tell you how I think about it. So definitely 100% we can all agree post-COVID, post-COVID, with lockdowns and all that stuff and changes in the way we work, there was a fundamental change in the way we work, particularly in maybe even white collar type work. So what I mean by that is anyone that works within technology or office-based type work. There was a very big change that occurred then, and I don't know if we all realise it, but we all should be realising it now. And we demonstrated that you could all work from home, right? So the question is, what does that mean? We can all work from home, so should we all work from home from now on? Now, my company has developed a policy, and it continuously refines. I think the type of industry you're in, the country you're in, makes a difference in terms of how that policy is defined. And I think, everyone's got their own variation and story to it. But I do fundamentally believe, and the studies are starting to come out from it, I've recently read quite a bit on this. AFR just published some content on this, on some studies that have been done. We cannot lose the human connection. It's really bad if you think you can be 100% remote. I don't actually fundamentally agree with that. So we do have people now that work interstate. We primarily only hired out of the Sydney market, but we now have people in China, we have people in New Zealand, we have people in Brisbane, and we have people in Melbourne now. I think one in Tasmania and another one maybe in Perth. But we have people all over the place working, and so we do have to support this sort of hybrid type of working where we don't actually see people, but we know that they're working, that's nothing new, and I'm not giving anything revolutionary, but I'm just trying to emphasize that the world has changed, and I think the way access to talent has changed. So you do need to think about what people want. We do have a very low unemployment rate despite consumer sentiment being low. So flexibility in terms of work is going to be super important in order to attract talent. I can tell you what we did as a company. So post-COVID, we went to what we call a hybrid working environment. And so hybrid means that it's about 2.5 days a week in office, 2.5 days a week at home. So the way the maths work on that is on a fortnightly basis, 3 days in office, 2 days at home, 3 days at home, 2 days in office. And the other caveat to that is company critical events like Christmas party, company town halls. We have a strategic town hall and a company social town hall where we do acknowledgements and recognition are all mandatory days. Whole team events are mandatory days, and they can include as part of the days that you work in office. But there's a bunch of rules behind that. We found that that's working quite well. There are now nuances to that. There are some specific teams that we've had to, instead of providing a blanket set of rules for everyone, we've had to go and adjust that specific teams. To give an example, a sales and service team that relies on the energy of each other to generate results has worked out that policy doesn't work as well, subject to maybe a few exceptions or high performers. So we've made those I would call it the benefit of having a flexible hybrid sort of work environment more restrictive, because it means that it's a better outcome for the company. And if you aren't delivering on key KPIs, or your deliverables across the board aren't there, you have to come back into the office under more stricter supervision with management. I do have an expectation in our business that management is more than half the time in the office. It's closer to 60 to 70% of the time in the office is my expectation for management. And if you're a high-touch team, you're probably more 100% of the time in the office. I know it's a big topic, and I've given you the best answer I possibly can, but that's certainly the way we think about it at hipages.
Did that answer your question,
Thanks,
Gil?
Robbie. It did, absolutely. Lots to think about for sure, but yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, Gil, for your question. Thanks, Robbie. Shannon, did you want to jump on and ask your question to Robbie?
Yeah, thanks guys for putting this together, calling in from Seattle, so hopefully my dog isn't snoring too loudly. But Robbie, you had mentioned that it took you 3 months to get your product to market, and it pretty much immediately started to sell. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the customer discovery process you went through, and just how many interviews did you complete? Did that process ever stop? When did you know that you had enough to take it to market?
Yeah, okay. So to answer that question, I'll give you the story, and then I'll answer half that question for you. No, it never stops. I think we spend somewhere between maybe 100 to 200, like lots and lots of money on continuous research. We have like a customer advocacy group now where we're doing a lot with them to try and understand and go deeper and deeper into the customer's mindset. So as you get bigger in scale, you start to understand the categories or the segmentation and the personas of your customers, and you need to go really, really deep so that you're building and continuously building product that is fit for the customer. You're innovating and developing for them. So long story short, no, you never stop with the research. It never ends. And sometimes if it's qualitative research, it's enough to have 10 to 20 sort of customers in quants. Statistical significance gets it around an N of 200. But I generally like an N of about 500 to 1,000. So the error rate is reduced when you increase the sample size. For those of you that do a bit of maths or have done a bit of statistics, you'll know what I'm talking about. In terms of the interview process when we first started, I definitely didn't follow best practice for interview, and I didn't follow because I had no idea what I was doing. I just wanted to get comfortable to talk to customers, really, and I felt that if I spoke to more trades, because in Australia we call them tradies, so you call them in America pros, I think. I just felt that if we'd spoken to enough trades, I would get a good grasp of it, and I try to make sure I got different types of from different geographies and different size of businesses. It's a bit hard to work it out back then how big they were from an ad that you would see in a classified directory, but we picked a random sample size from all different sources, and I think the original sample size was about 40 customers, and I had a rule that if any one of my 3 questions got a no, so less than 50%, we would have to increase the sample size. And because it meant it failed, and I don't think we could have built a business model or a business case that had more, had a number less than 50%. So let me explain it a little bit more. My first question was, there was a script to the 40 businesses, and the script was, hey, we're building this thing where you can find your find your business on the internet. So it just sounds crazy now, and for those of you that have been only really in the game for the last 10 years, 20 years ago, no one really heard of Google before. No one knew what a search engine was. And so my question was, and just try and make that relevant for your category now and time and place. But think about it back then. I'm just trying to give an example of what happened. So I explained what we were going to do. And I said, you might get a few inquiries. It's going to cost you a couple $100. Is that worth it? But before I even asked the question about the money, the first question I asked was, does that idea sound good to you? Yes or no? And if I got less than 50%, then I had a problem. But I actually got a 66% yes rate. So I was like, oh, good. That means that people like what I had to say. When I'm going to sell this, people will listen to me and understand the product. So then the P in that was the product. I like the product. Great. Okay, so let me talk to you about the price. And the price was like, yeah, man, that's like a no-brainer. I got that in my pocket now, and you're going to give me that for a full year, and I'm going to get some online presence. So I got like 66% also as a yes. It was like 66%, but between the range of 60 and 70% were yeses to the first question and yeses to the second question. And then the third question was, hey, what if I didn't do as well as I said I would in my commitment to you, but considering the price and where we're going and your belief in what we're doing as a product and the service that we're going to give you, would you do it again in the following year? And if the answer was 66%, again, well, over 50%, I was aiming for over 50% for all three, remember, I got the answer was 66%. I knew straight away that I had a business, and the next thing was to build actually out the product, which took 3 months to do. And then we started to offer the customer, well, I remember I didn't sell straight away. It took me 2 months after that to build up the confidence to actually get a credit card. And I actually remember customer number one. Unfortunately, he's not a customer of ours anymore. I think he's retired. But it was Carlos Gomez, and he was a Tyler in Blacktown, it's a suburb in Sydney. And I remember I didn't even give him the trial. He said, yeah, I'll give you $70. Here's my credit card. Now, the funny story behind that is we didn't even have a merchant facility to be able to accept credit card after I'd spoken to him. But that one conversation, I went home so happy. And the reason behind that is because I was able to demonstrate that we could make a sale. And it only takes one sale, then you make 10 sales, then 100, 1,000, 10,000. And today we've got 35,000 customers. So that's the backstory behind all of that.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I've never heard of such a concrete formula before to customer discovery, so thanks for sharing.
Yeah, Rob, your answers are amazing. They're so in depth and so simple, but you give a lot of information. So yeah, I'm sure people are loving this right now. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks, Shannon, for jumping on. So it is 2:56 p.m. We're about a couple minutes off to finish this LinkedIn Live. If there is any last questions, please raise your hand now, and I can bring you up on stage. I think we've got room for one more question before we jump off. But if there isn't any more questions, I'd like to just end it with, thanking Robbie first and foremost for jumping on this LinkedIn audio. I think it's his first, which is exciting. I hope that he does these again. So that's really exciting.
No, I'm happy to. Easy.
Yeah, they're really interesting. It's like a Twitter space almost, and I think they're really educational, and it gives you an opportunity to engage with people that want to ask questions. So it's just I think it's much better, to be honest, than a podcast. So I don't think there's any questions.
Can I just ask one question before we wrap up? Robbie, you mentioned in the remote working and working from home question that previously you only hired people in NSW, and now you have staff all over the place. Now, looking back, at your journey, do you think that doing hiring people all over and getting that benefit of having access to talent which is not geographically limited, if you were to do it again the hipages, would you do that sooner rather than waiting for COVID to do that, make you do that?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. I'm not sorry for us taking our time with it. I think the reality is there's time and place and technology. I think the technology, when you go back 10 years ago, was just not good enough.
Of course.
But technology and products like Zoom, for example, have really changed the game. But also, to be fair as well, getting access to talent has never been so challenging as it is now. In all the time that I've been in business, I think it's the hardest. And it's reflective at an economic level. You can see unemployment rates sitting around 3.5%, 4%. I actually think it's a negative a negative unemployment rate, as in like we just do not have sufficient product engineering people in the country. That's just the average, you know. So what it means is companies need to adapt, and you have to be agile and innovative in the way you think. I actually have a term for it. It's called you got to have some gangster moves. You know, and I think during COVID, one of the gangster moves that we did was we hired from overseas. You know, we had like we can do the visa status thing where you can, you know, if you can't get, and there's a shortage of a certain skill, you can hire them from overseas. So I think we have in hipages, I think like, you know, in our product engineering, like 10 to 12 people from Sri Lanka. There's an 8 to 10 cohort of people from Brazil, few people from Ukraine. You know, like we offer some amazing talent globally, and you know, at a time when no one was hiring internationally, we did the complete opposite. So Gangster Move is doing something crazy or different that other companies don't do to get that recruitment happening. Yeah, like I'm happy to go again in a whole in-depth talk about as well on hiring
Amazing.
what I call gangster moves, but that's the stuff that, you know, that we do.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. I think just to wrap it up, because obviously this LinkedIn Live was about scaling your startup, and I think I'd love if you could leave us with the biggest piece of advice that you could give entrepreneurs out there today in today's market. I would say, what is it that they should be applying when scaling their own startup?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. That was actually one of the key things I wanted to talk about. So, in my mind, the number one thing is don't be afraid to get to customers and talk to the customers. So have a customer-focused mindset. And number two, I think you have to take a data-driven approach to decision-making. I think tracking every possible metric that you can get your hands on and understanding how those metrics are like in a waterfall driving to the goals or outcomes of your business is super important. So someone gave me a piece of advice and I've never forgotten it. And it applies to nearly every industry, whether you're in sports or whether you're in business, it doesn't matter. You need to track the data, as in capture the data, monitor the data, and develop ideas on that data, and then innovate and test those ideas based off that data and continue the cycle. And that's one of the most important things someone's told me. Probably the third thing is, as a founder and someone that's just seen through, honestly, I'm 47 years old, but I feel like a 70-year-old man in terms of experiences, 3 or 4 lifetimes worth. I think you need to build resilience as an individual. It's a roller coaster ride. And the way to do that is, you know, not to use too many sporting puns here, but you need to get match fit. And that is eat well, sleep well, take care of yourself and, listen to things outside of just your normal realm and try and network as much as possible. Those are some sort of like, fundamentals that, will keep you going. And it's not a race, again, with the sporting marathons. So it's not a race. It's a marathon is what I'm trying to say. It's not a race. So people are going to want you to make money in 3-4 years. It sometimes takes 10, 20 years, even 30 to 40 years. That's just normal. And you need to ask yourself if you're up for that.
Oh, great advice, especially that last piece. I literally did a post on this the other day. I said, it takes 10 years for this thing, if anything, to really come to fruition, it just takes, it's a long game. It's a long game. And most people are not willing to do that, which is totally okay. It just doesn't mean that it's for you, right? So just, I guess, choose what you want to do. But yeah, I agree. It's definitely a long, exciting journey. Thank you so much, Robbie, again, for jumping on this LinkedIn Live. We really appreciate you and your time that you've taken today to share your story and everything that's happening with hipages and answering the questions for people in the audience. Hopefully we can do one of these again and pick certain topics for you to jump on, because we did have questions that are still pending that we didn't get to answer because we're over time. It's 3:03. So I'll reach out to your marketing team and maybe we can do something like this again at some point in a few months or something.
Absolutely, happy to, anytime.
But yeah, thank you again, Robbie. And is there anything else that you want to leave with the audience before we do jump off?
No, all good. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you've got anything specific that you wanted to go into a little bit more detail, I'll do my best to answer the question. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Robbie.
Cheers.
Thanks,
See you.
Steve.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.